We will talk about what happens if you give up sugar for 3 weeks. When you stop consuming sugar, you may notice that music feels emotionally richer, you laugh more easily, your motivation improves, fruit tastes intensely sweet, and life feels simpler, clearer, better. This happens because sugar increases dopamine. Even a sweet taste activates the dopamine system, and fast glucose intake creates dopamine spikes. Through insulin spikes, through metabolic signaling, through reward circuitry activation. Insulin interacts with dopamine pathways, and dopamine is the main reward, drive, motivation system in the brain. When you regularly consume sugar, the brain learns to get reward, pleasure, relief from sweetness. Over time, this can reduce the sensitivity to other natural rewards. We see a similar mechanism in drug overuse and gambling and any pattern of high-intensity reward exposure. By removing added sugar, you allow dopamine sensitivity to recalibrate, gradually, naturally, measurably. Baseline mood stabilizes, motivation rises, and the brain responds more strongly to ordinary stimuli, to simple pleasures, to real-life rewards. When we say no sugar, we mean no honey, no syrups, no table sugar, no candy, no desserts, no cakes, no sweetened drinks, none, zero, removed. But you can still eat fruits, whole grains, white bread, rice, and potatoes. Even though they contain sugars, they are allowed, they are acceptable, they are included. The second change that happens when you stop eating sugar is that your belly fat starts to shrink, to soften, to recede. This happens because of insulin. Insulin is a storage hormone. When insulin is high, fat burning is suppressed. Fat storage is activated and liver fat production increases. When insulin is low, fat burning turns on, fat is released from adipose tissue, and the liver stops converting excess sugar into fat. At the same time, fluid retention decreases and hepatic fat production declines. After about 4 weeks, you may feel that your belly feels less tight, less heavy, less inflamed, not only because of fat loss, but also because of reduced inflammation, reduced water retention, reduced intestinal bloating. You feel less post-meal fatigue because of stable glucose, and you notice less puffiness in the face and in the whole body. This is because high insulin increases kidney sodium retention. More sodium means more water retention, more fluid accumulation, more visible swelling in the face and abdomen. When insulin levels fall, sodium retention drops, fluid balance improves, and you feel less puffy, less swollen, more defined. After stopping sugar intake, you feel less hunger and fewer cravings. You feel less urgency around food, fewer I need something sweet now moments, and eating becomes more predictable, more stable, more controlled. Late night snacking becomes rarer and the emotional impulse to eat weakens. This happens because of insulin stabilization. When you consume sugar, it causes a rapid glucose spike, a sharp insulin spike, and then a glucose crash. That crash triggers a stress response. Adrenaline, cortisol, hunger signaling. When sugar is removed, glucose curves smooth out, insulin fluctuations calm down, and the stress-driven hunger cycle fades. And where once dinner automatically led to dessert, now dinner ends, and that is it. Finished. Complete. Enough. This effect is real, noticeable, pronounced. The fourth change you may notice when you stop consuming sugar is less skin inflammation. You see fewer inflammatory breakouts, less facial redness, less swelling around acne lesions, and the skin looks less puffy, less reactive, more even. Even the skin texture begins to improve, to smooth, to refine. This effect is especially strong in acne-prone individuals, in those with a high glycemic diet, with insulin resistance, or with polycystic ovary syndrome. It happens because high insulin increases insulin-like growth factor, which stimulates sebaceous gland activity and keratinocyte proliferation. That means more sebum, more keratin production, more clogged pores. When sugar intake decreases, less oil is produced, less pore blockage occurs, and the skin becomes calmer, cleaner, more stable. At the same time, high blood glucose drives glycation. Glycation is when glucose binds to proteins and alters their structure. It leads to stiffer collagen, higher oxidative stress, and stronger inflammatory signaling. When glucose levels stabilize, glycation slows, collagen damage decreases, and the skin's repair capacity improves. Inflammatory markers also fall. Visceral fat releases inflammatory cytokines, small signaling molecules such as interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha. With lower sugar and lower insulin, visceral fat activity declines, cytokine release decreases, and systemic inflammation is reduced. In the skin, in the body, in the baseline physiology. The fifth change that happens when you stop consuming sugar is improved sleep. More specifically, deeper sleep, fewer night awakenings, and reduced rapid eye movement sleep fragmentation. You wake up more rested, more stable, more clear. There are fewer 3 a.m. awakenings, less food coma sleep, less night sweating, and a more stable morning mood. This happens because when glucose is high during sleep, it can trigger adrenaline and cortisol release. That leads to lighter sleep, micro-awakenings, and night sweating. High glucose also increases inflammatory marker production, which affects hypothalamic sleep regulation and reduces sleep quality. When the inflammatory tone drops, sleep architecture improves, deeper, steadier, more restorative. At the same time, when you reduce or remove added sugar, your gut microbiome begins to improve. It decreases the growth of certain opportunistic bacteria and increases short-chain fatty acid-producing bacteria, especially when fiber intake rises. This improves gut barrier integrity, reduces endotoxin translocation, and supports a more stable internal environment. You feel less bloating, more regular bowel movements, less urgency, and less post-meal heaviness. High sugar intake is associated with increased lipopolysaccharide translocation. Lipopolysaccharide is a bacterial endotoxin that drives low-grade inflammation. Reducing sugar lowers this burden, lowers this signal, lowers this systemic stress. The microbiome responds rapidly, fast, measurably, detectably. And even 5 days can be enough to show a meaningful shift, a measurable adaptation, a clear compensation. But stopping sugar is not as simple as it sounds. There are important phases, predictable reactions, physiological shifts you must understand. Within the first 3 days, you may experience irritability, strong sugar cravings, headaches, fatigue, even brain fog. Why does this happen? It happens because of dopamine fluctuation. When you suddenly remove a strong dopamine stimulus, the brain experiences a temporary drop in stimulation, and that creates irritability, restlessness, cravings. At the same time, glucose regulation is still unstable. Insulin levels may remain relatively elevated, while incoming glucose drops, leading to energy dips, mild hypoglycemia-like sensations, and mental fog. Stress response also increases. The body reacts with higher cortisol and adrenaline, and this can cause headaches, fatigue, and that wired but tired feeling. It is not weakness. It is adaptation, neurochemical recalibration, metabolic transition. By day 4 and 5, cravings begin to reduce, hunger feels less urgent, energy crashes become milder, bloating decreases, and taste sensitivity increases. Insulin stabilizes, rapid glucose crashes fade, and ghrelin, the hunger hormone, becomes more rhythmic and predictable. By day 6 and 7, mood feels more stable, morning energy improves, emotional eating urges decrease, water retention slightly reduces, and sleep continuity improves. The system is calming, hormonally, neurologically, metabolically. Between day 10 and 14, cravings dramatically lower, natural foods taste intensely sweet, appetite becomes predictable, mental clarity improves, and post-meal fatigue decreases. This suggests partial dopamine receptor resensitization. It is not dramatic euphoria. It is something better, calm satisfaction, stable motivation, quiet reward. By day 15 to 20, daily energy feels stable, belly bloating reduces, desire for ultra-processed foods weakens. Emotional stability improves, skin clarity improves. This happens because of stabilized inflammatory signaling, reduced liver fat production, improved insulin sensitivity, and a more balanced gut microbiome. This is not magic. It is physiology, adaptation, restoration. To make stopping sugar easier, I will give you several practical strategies you can apply in everyday life. Simple, physiological, effective. First, eat real protein at every meal. This is critical because protein stimulates peptide YY and glucagon-like peptide 1 and reduces ghrelin. Together, these hormones blunt glucose spikes, stabilize appetite, and reduce cravings. The target is about 30 grams of protein per meal. It is the strongest appetite stabilizer, the most reliable satiety anchor, the most consistent metabolic buffer. Second, do not skip meals during the first 2 weeks. Skipping increases cortisol, destabilizes glucose regulation, and intensifies cravings. Early stability is more important than calorie restriction. Third, increase fiber intake. Vegetables, legumes, oats, seeds, nuts. Fiber slows absorption, improves insulin response, supports the gut microbiome, and prolongs satiety. Fourth, remove liquid sugars first. Soda, sweetened coffee, energy drinks. Liquid sugar produces the highest insulin spikes and the lowest satiety response. It is absorbed rapidly, spikes quickly, crashes sharply. Prioritize sleep. Expect that during the first 4 days, irritability may appear temporarily. This is normal adaptation. Be prepared for it, mentally, physiologically, strategically. If needed, eat whole fruits. Fruit contains fiber, slower absorbing carbohydrates, and polyphenols. It does not trigger the same insulin spikes as soda or refined sugar. Hydrate properly. Mild dehydration can amplify fatigue and cravings. Do not replace sugar with ultra-processed healthy snacks. Many protein bars labeled no sugar still contain refined starches that spike glucose similarly. The label is not the physiology. Reduce environmental exposure. What is out of sight reduces cue-driven cravings, fewer visual triggers, fewer automatic impulses. Now about zero-calorie cola. It does not spike insulin the way sugar does, but the story is more nuanced. These drinks usually contain aspartame or sucralose. They do not significantly increase blood glucose, and the insulin response is minimal or absent. However, the sweet taste still activates dopamine signaling. The magnitude is smaller than sugar, but the signal remains. Does it cause a dopamine crash? Not in the same way as sugar, because there is no glucose spike, no insulin spike, no metabolic crash. But it maintains sweet taste conditioning. In practice, if your goal is metabolic reset, zero cola is acceptable in moderation. If your goal is reward pathway recalibration, frequent artificial sweeteners may slow adaptation because they keep the preference for intense sweetness alive. If zero cola helps prevent relapse, it can be a useful tool, especially in the first 2 weeks. After 3 weeks, gradually reduce dependence on intense sweetness. Better alternatives include sparkling water, lemon water, and unsweetened tea. Less stimulation, less conditioning, more recalibration. Now let's look at long-term sustainability. First, yes, it is sustainable long-term to stop added sugars if the approach is structured, balanced, flexible. When the diet includes high fiber, whole foods, and adequate protein, outcomes improve. Lower cardiovascular risk, lower diabetes risk, lower fatty liver disease risk. This pattern is not extreme, it is physiological, preventive, evidence-aligned. But you must recognize when it becomes unsustainable. If you attempt to eliminate all carbohydrates because of perfectionism, because of rigidity, because of social isolation, adherence becomes difficult. Rigid restriction increases food preoccupation, promotes binge-restrict cycles, and can lead to sweet rebound episodes. This pattern is primarily psychological, not metabolic. The main question, does it cause future dependence or rebound? With gradual reduction and a flexible mindset, the long-term result is reduced sweet preference, more stable eating, more predictable appetite. But with extreme elimination or moral framing, sugar is evil, the psychological salience of sugar rises. That increases the risk of binge episodes, compensatory eating, and stronger rebound. Is it safe? Yes. Long-term low-added sugar intake does not cause health problems when carbohydrates, calories, and micronutrients remain adequate. The goal is not zero carbohydrate. It is balanced intake, stable metabolism, sustainable structure. Reducing added sugar does not damage dopamine. It reduces overstimulation, restores sensitivity, and supports a more stable reward system. It is beneficial, safe, sustainable when done with structure, with flexibility, with perspective. Fruit is not the enemy. You can eat whole fruit. It is protective long-term. Fiber-rich, metabolically supportive. Fiber is the foundation. for glucose stability, for satiety, for microbiome health. Protein stabilizes appetite, stabilizes energy, stabilizes craving intensity, and sleep strongly determines craving strength, impulse control, reward sensitivity. Artificial sweeteners are tools, not solutions. They can help during the transition phase, but they should not replace a real dietary structure, a real nutritional framework, a real habit system. Occasional sugar intake does not erase adaptation. One exposure does not reset the system. What matters is pattern, frequency, consistency. Total calorie intake still matters. You can stop added sugar and still remain overweight if overall energy balance remains high. Social sustainability matters. A diet must fit real life, real schedules, real environments. The goal is not absolute sugar elimination. The goal is insulin stability, metabolic regulation, predictable energy. Insulin regulation is the central metabolic lever. Sugar is one of the strongest insulin drivers, but not the only one. The strategy is not fear. The strategy is stability, structure, sustainability.